I woke up at 4 in the morning to 18 inches of fresh snow and immediately knew this was going to be a long day. But what I didn't know was that by noon, I'd be standing in my driveway staring at an empty mounting bracket where my custom snowplow blade should have been. The blade that cost me $3,000. The blade that was the only thing standing between my entire street and being completely snowed in for days. My name is Marcus Yates, and I've lived in the Riverside Meadows development in Buffalo, New York for 7 years. I'm a contractor by trade, which is why I have all the heavy equipment that makes me useful when winter decides to bury western New York under a blanket of lake-effect snow. I bought my Ford F-350 specifically because I could mount a plow blade on it, and for the past 6 winters, I've been the guy who clears Pinewood Drive and the 3 connecting cul-de-sacs in our neighborhood. I don't get paid for it. The HOA certainly doesn't compensate me. I just do it because I'm up early anyway. I have the equipment, and I hate being trapped in my house. But that morning, standing there in my insulated Carhartt jacket with snow still falling around me, I felt my blood pressure spike as I stared at those empty mounting points. The blade had been there when I went to bed at 10. I'd checked it specifically because the weather forecast had been calling for this storm all week. "What the hell?" I muttered, walking around the front of my truck. The snow around my driveway had been disturbed, footprints already filling in with fresh powder, but I could still make out the drag marks where someone had pulled my blade away. It wasn't a light piece of equipment. That thing weighed over 400 pounds. Whoever took it needed either a vehicle or several people. I pulled out my phone and dialed my neighbor, Roger Martinez. He answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "Marcus, it's 4 in the morning, man. Someone stole my plow blade right off my truck." There was a pause. "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I'm looking at my empty truck right now. You hear anything last night?" "No, nothing. We took melatonin around 9 and crashed hard. You call the police yet?" "About to. Just wanted to check if you saw anything first." "Sorry, man, that's insane. Who steals a snowplow blade?" That was the question, wasn't it? I thanked Roger and hung up, then dialed the non-emergency police line. While I waited on hold, I walked around my property, looking for any clue about where my blade had gone. The drag marks led to the street, where they disappeared into the mess of snow. Whoever did this had loaded it into a vehicle. A dispatcher finally picked up, and I explained the situation. She took my information and said an officer would be out when they could, but with the storm, they were dealing with accidents all over the city. I understood. A stolen plow blade wasn't exactly a priority compared to people's safety. I went back inside to make coffee and figure out my next move. My wife, Jennifer, came downstairs around 5, already dressed for her nursing shift at Buffalo General. "You're up early even for you," she said, kissing my cheek before heading to the coffee pot. "Someone stole my plow blade last night." She turned around, eyes wide. "You're joking." "Wish I was. It's just gone, right off the truck." "Who would do that? It's not like you can just sell a custom plow blade on Craigslist. You'd be surprised what people try to sell online. But yeah, it's weird. Really weird." Jennifer poured her coffee and leaned against the counter. "What are you going to do about the street? Everyone's going to be snowed in." "I know. I'm trying to figure that out. Maybe I can rent something from the equipment place on Walden, but they're probably slammed today." She squeezed my shoulder sympathetically. "This is going to sound paranoid, but do you think someone took it specifically to stop you from plowing?" "Why would anyone do that?" "I don't know. Just seems like an odd coincidence that it disappeared right before the biggest storm of the season." I hadn't considered that angle, but Jennifer had a point. The timing was suspicious. Still, Who in our neighborhood would have a motive to stop me from clearing snow? Everyone benefited from what I did. Jennifer left for work around 6, driving her Honda CR-V carefully down our still unplowed street. I watched her go, feeling guilty that I couldn't clear a path for her. By 7, my phone started ringing. First, it was Tom Hendricks from 2 houses down, asking if I was going to plow soon because he needed to get to work. Then it was Deanne Park, who had a doctor's appointment at 9. Then 3 more neighbors, all politely inquiring about when I'd be clearing the street. I explained the situation to each of them, and the responses ranged from sympathetic to frustrated. Nobody seemed to know anything about the missing blade. By 8, I was on my 4th cup of coffee and searching online for emergency plow blade rentals when I heard a knock at my door. Through the window, I could see Barbara Carmichael standing on my porch, and my stomach immediately dropped. Barbara was the HOA president, a 52-year-old woman with short blonde hair that she kept in a style I can only describe as aggressively suburban. She wore her authority over our neighborhood like a crown, and in the 7 years I'd lived here, we'd had exactly one pleasant interaction, and that was when I'd first moved in before she knew anything about me. I opened the door. "Barbara, what can I do for you?" "Good morning, Marcus. I'm here on official HOA business." She had a clipboard, because of course she did. "I'm conducting an inspection of the neighborhood and wanted to address some concerns. In the middle of a snowstorm. The snow is exactly why I'm here. I've received several complaints this morning about our street not being cleared." I stared at her. "Barbara, someone stole my plow blade last night, right off my truck. I literally can't clear the street without it." Her expression didn't change. "That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the fact that residents are unable to leave their homes safely. As a resident of Riverside Meadows, you're subject to the same HOA rules as everyone else." "What are you talking about? I'm not being paid to plow. I do it out of the goodness of my heart." "Be that as it may, the HOA bylaws state that all residents must maintain safe access to their properties. Your decision to take on snow removal for the street has created a dependency, and now that you're unable to fulfill that role, you're technically in violation." I felt heat rising in my face despite the cold air coming through the open door. "Are you seriously threatening me with an HOA violation because someone stole my equipment?" "I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply informing you of the situation. The HOA expects this matter to be resolved promptly." She made a note on her clipboard. "I'm also here to inform you that there will be an emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 to discuss winter snow removal protocols going forward. Tonight, in this weather. The community center has a generator. We'll be fine. Your attendance is strongly encouraged." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Marcus, I noticed your garbage cans were visible from the street on Tuesday. That's also a violation. Please ensure they're stored out of sight except on collection days." She walked down my porch steps carefully, and I watched her navigate through the snow to her white Lexus SUV parked on the street. Only as she opened the door did I notice something in her vehicle, something large and metallic in the back cargo area, covered with a tarp. My heart started pounding. It couldn't be, could it? I grabbed my jacket and boots and hurried out to the street, but Barbara was already pulling away, her SUV fishtailing slightly as she drove through the deep snow. I stood there watching her taillights disappear around the corner, my mind racing. The police showed up around 10. Officer Patterson was a tired-looking guy in his 40s who took my statement and photographed the empty mounting bracket on my truck. He was sympathetic but realistic about the chances of recovery. "To be honest, Mr. Yates, these kinds of thefts are tough. If someone wanted your blade badly enough to take it, they probably already have it hidden away or are trying to move it out of state. What if I told you I might have seen it this morning? In my HOA president's car. Officer Patterson looked up from his notepad. Did you get a clear look at it? No, it was covered with a tarp, but the shape was right, and the timing seems pretty suspicious. Suspicious isn't probable cause. You have any reason to believe your HOA president would want to steal your plow blade? I thought about Barbara's attitude at my door this morning, her criticism about me not plowing the street. She showed up at my door this morning to give me grief about not clearing the street, even though I explained it had been stolen, and she was pretty hostile about it. That does seem odd. Officer Patterson made some notes. I'll drive by her house and take a look around, but without direct evidence, there's not much I can do. You might want to check if you have any security camera footage of your driveway. I don't have cameras. Never thought I needed them in this neighborhood. After Officer Patterson left, I spent the rest of the morning calling equipment rental places. As I'd suspected, everyone was either closed due to the storm or completely out of plow blades. One place in Cheektowaga told me they might have something available by the end of the week, which didn't help anyone trying to get to work today. By noon, the neighborhood Facebook page was blowing up with complaints about the unplowed street. Some people were understanding about my situation, but others were getting nasty. Someone named Jennifer Walsh, no relation to my wife, posted that I was unreliable and that the neighborhood should make other arrangements for snow removal. Several people pointed out that I'd been doing this for free for 6 years, but that didn't stop the criticism. What really got me was a post from Barbara Carmichael at 1 p.m. She wrote a long message about how the HOA took everyone's safety seriously, and that they were exploring options for professional snow removal services. She ended with a reminder about the emergency meeting that evening and encouraged full attendance to discuss this matter affecting our entire community. The comments on her post were split. Half the people were thanking her for taking action, while the other half were pointing out that I'd been handling snow removal just fine until someone stole my equipment. A few people suggested the HOA should pay for a replacement blade since the neighborhood benefited from my work, but Barbara shut that down quickly, responding that the HOA budget doesn't cover personal equipment for individual residents. I was reading through the increasingly heated Facebook thread when my phone rang. It was Roger from next door. Hey man, I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about Barbara and her car. Yeah, so I was shoveling my driveway and I saw her drive by about an hour ago. She went past her house and turned down Oakmont Street toward the storage units. My pulse quickened. The storage facility at the edge of our development was where a lot of residents kept their boats, RVs, and seasonal equipment. Did you see where she went exactly? No, but it's not like there's much down that way except the storage place. You thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking I need to take a drive. Want company? Nah, I got it. Thanks for the heads up, Roger. I bundled up and headed out to my truck. Without the plow blade, it handled the deep snow better than it would have with the extra weight up front, but I still had to navigate carefully. The streets in our development were a mess. A few people with SUVs and trucks had ventured out, creating narrow tire tracks, but most of the roads were impassable for regular cars. The storage facility was at the back of the neighborhood, a fenced compound with about 50 units of varying sizes. I drove slowly past the entrance, looking for Barbara's white Lexus, and spotted it parked in front of Unit 23. The cargo area was open, and I could see her struggling with something heavy. I parked on the street and walked toward the facility. The gate was open, Probably for the same reason most people weren't being careful today. The snow made everything harder. As I got closer, I could clearly see what Barbara was unloading from her vehicle, my snowplow blade. She heard my footsteps crunching in the snow and spun around, her face going through several expressions at once: surprise, guilt, anger, and then something that settled into defiance. "Marcus, what are you doing here? That's my plow blade, Barbara. I don't know what you're talking about." I pointed at the bright yellow blade leaning against her SUV. "That's my custom 8-foot Fisher HD plow blade with the orange reflective strips that I added myself. It's literally sitting right there." Barbara crossed her arms. "This is HOA property. We purchased it to ensure reliable snow removal for the community." "You purchased it? When?" "That's HOA business." "No, Barbara, that's theft. That's my equipment stolen from my driveway last night. I have the receipts, the registration, photos of it mounted on my truck." "You want to keep pretending this is yours? We can call the police right now." Her jaw tightened. "You're being unreasonable. Do you know how many complaints I received this morning?" 37. 37 residents unable to leave their homes because you've made yourself indispensable with your little snow removal hobby, and then you can't deliver when it matters most. Because you stole my equipment. The HOA is taking control of essential neighborhood services. We can't be dependent on the whims of individual residents. This blade will be used for the benefit of everyone, operated by someone accountable to the community. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police." "You don't want to do that, Marcus." "Actually, I really do." Barbara stepped forward, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "Think about what you're doing. You're going to create a huge scene over a misunderstanding. The HOA can compensate you for the blade. We can work something out that benefits everyone. This isn't a misunderstanding. You committed theft. You came to my house this morning and threatened me with violations while you had my stolen property in your car. That's psychotic, Barbara." Her expression hardened. "I'm trying to be reasonable here. You're the one escalating this situation. If you insist on involving the police, I'll have to inform them about all the HOA violations you've been accumulating. The unsightly equipment in your driveway, the commercial vehicle parked on a residential street, your work trailer that exceeds the size restrictions in the bylaws. Are you seriously trying to blackmail me? I'm trying to explain the consequences of your choices." I finished dialing 911 and held the phone to my ear. Barbara's face flushed red as the dispatcher answered. I explained the situation, gave the address of the storage facility, and requested an officer to respond to a theft in progress. Barbara stood there the entire time, glaring at me with such intensity I thought she might physically attack me. When I hung up, she finally spoke. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. The HOA has ways of making things very difficult for residents who don't cooperate." Threaten me again. "The police are recording everything when they get here." We stood in tense silence for the next 12 minutes until Officer Patterson pulled up, apparently responding to his own call. He took one look at the situation and sighed. "Mr. Yates, Miss Carmichael, someone want to explain what's going on?" "That's my plow blade," I said, pointing. "I reported it stolen this morning. She has it in her possession." Barbara immediately shifted into her concerned citizen mode. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. The HOA recently purchased snow removal equipment to ensure neighborhood safety. Mr. Yates seems to believe this is his personal property, but I assure you we have documentation." "Can I see that documentation?" Officer Patterson asked. "It's at my home. I can retrieve it." "What about you, Mr. Yates? You said you have proof this is yours." I pulled up the photos on my phone, showing the blade mounted on my truck. including date-stamped images from earlier in the week. I also had the receipt in my email, which I showed him. The serial number on the receipt matched the number stamped on the blade itself. Officer Patterson examined everything carefully, then looked at Barbara. "Madam, do you have any documentation on you right now that proves the HOA purchased this specific piece of equipment?" As I said, "It's at my home." "And when did the HOA allegedly purchase this blade?" Barbara hesitated. "Last week." "So the HOA purchased this exact blade last week, but Mr. Yates has photos of it mounted on his truck from 5 days ago. Those could be old photos." "They're date-stamped, madam." Officer Patterson's voice had taken on a more formal tone. "I'm going to need you to be straight with me here. How did this blade come into your possession?" "I already told you the truth, Miss Carmichael." Barbara's composure cracked. "The neighborhood was at risk. He's been the only one clearing snow for years, creating a dependency that's dangerous for everyone. What happens when he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore? What happens when he goes on vacation during a storm? The HOA needs to control essential services." "So you took it from his property without permission?" "I relocated it to a central location where it could be properly managed." "That's called theft, madam." Officer Patterson pulled out his notepad. "Mr. Yates, do you want to press charges?" I looked at Barbara, whose face had gone pale. Part of me wanted to let it go, to just take my blade back and be done with it. But she'd stolen from me, threatened me, and tried to manipulate the situation. If I didn't follow through, she'd just find another way to retaliate. "Yes, I want to press charges." What happened next was almost surreal. Officer Patterson arrested Barbara Carmichael for theft in the 3rd degree, reading her rights while she sputtered about calling her lawyer, and how this was all a misunderstanding. She kept insisting that the HOA would back her up, that she was acting in the community's best interest, that I was the one being unreasonable. The officer was professional but firm. "Madam, you took property that didn't belong to you without permission. That's theft under New York law, regardless of your intentions." As he led her to his patrol car, Barbara shot me a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over, Marcus. The HOA will bury you in violations." "Looking forward to it," I said, meaning none of it. After they left, I stood in the snow next to my recovered plow blade, trying to process what had just happened. The HOA president had stolen my equipment and been arrested. This was going to blow up the neighborhood in ways I couldn't even imagine. I called Roger to bring his truck over, and together we loaded the blade into his bed and drove it back to my house. By the time we got it remounted on my truck, it was almost 3 p.m. I'd lost nearly half a day of plowing time, but at least I had my equipment back. I spent the next 4 hours clearing Pinewood Drive and the connecting streets, working until it was dark and my back ached from the constant jarring of the blade hitting packed snow. People came out of their houses to thank me, many of them having seen the drama on the neighborhood Facebook page. Word had spread fast about Barbara's arrest. When I finally finished around 7:30 p.m., exhausted and hungry, I pulled into my driveway to find Jennifer's car already there. She met me at the door with a hug and a bowl of hot chili. "You're a hero on Facebook right now," she said as I peeled off my wet layers. "But also, what the hell happened today?" I told her everything while I ate, and her jaw dropped multiple times during the story. "Barbara stole your plow blade. Barbara Carmichael, arrested and everything." "This is insane. What's going to happen to the HOA?" "No idea. She said there was supposed to be an emergency meeting tonight, but I'm guessing that's canceled now." Jennifer pulled up the neighborhood Facebook page on her phone. "Oh my God, Marcus, you need to see this." The page had exploded. There were over 200 comments on the most recent post, which was from Barbara's husband, Donald. He'd written a long, defensive message about how Barbara had been under tremendous stress trying to manage the HOA, and that her actions had been misguided but well-intentioned. He blamed me for pressing charges instead of working things out privately, and suggested I owed the neighborhood an apology for creating this crisis. The responses to his post were brutal. People were pointing out that Barbara had literally committed a crime, that I'd been providing free snow removal for years, and that I had every right to protect my property. Someone had even created a poll asking if Barbara should resign as HOA president, and it was currently running 83% in favor of resignation. But there were also people defending Barbara, mostly the same ones who'd complained about me not plowing that morning. They argued that the HOA needed strong leadership and that I'd overreacted by involving the police. A few suggested I was on a power trip and enjoying the attention. "This is a nightmare," I said, putting down my phone. "You did the right thing," Jennifer assured me. "She stole from you." "That's not a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. That's a crime." Over the next few days, the situation got worse before it got better. Barbara's lawyer got her released on her own recognizance, and she immediately went on the offensive. She sent out an official HOA email claiming I'd been verbally abusive to her, and that she'd feared for her safety, which was why she'd temporarily relocated my plow blade. She also called an emergency board meeting to discuss my pattern of violations and whether I should face fines or other disciplinary action. The violations she cited were absurd. My work truck parked on the street, even though dozens of residents parked trucks on the street. My tool trailer, which she claimed exceeded the size limits, even though she'd never measured it. The famous garbage can incident, where my cans had been visible from the street on a non-collection day. Never mind that it was because collection had been delayed by weather. She even tried to claim that my snow plowing created a liability for the HOA because I wasn't properly insured as a commercial snow removal service. I received 3 certified letters in 1 week, each outlining different violations and demanding compliance. The fines started small, $25 here, $50 there, but the message was clear. Barbara was going to make my life miserable. The neighborhood was divided. My supporters started a petition to remove Barbara from the HOA board, collecting over 60 signatures. But Barbara's supporters, a group of about 15 residents who seemed to worship her authority, launched their own campaign claiming I was undermining community governance and creating a dangerous precedent. Things came to a head at the next official HOA meeting, held on a Tuesday evening in mid-December. The community center was packed with at least 80 residents, way more than usually attended these meetings. Barbara sat at the head table with the other board members, looking composed and professional in a navy blazer. I sat in the audience between Jennifer and Roger, feeling like I was on trial. Barbara called the meeting to order and immediately went into her prepared remarks. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight during this difficult time for our community. As many of you know, there was an unfortunate incident involving myself and a resident who chose to escalate a disagreement into a criminal matter. I'm not here to defend my actions, which I acknowledge were imperfect, but I do want to provide context." She went on for 15 minutes, painting herself as a dedicated volunteer who'd been pushed to desperation by my uncooperative attitude and the neighborhood's dependency on my snow removal. She claimed she'd been trying to secure professional services for months, but that I'd been territorial about the plowing and had discouraged the HOA from hiring contractors. None of that was true, but she delivered it with such conviction that I could see some people nodding along. When she finally finished, she opened the floor for comments. Roger stood up first. "I've lived here for 12 years, he said. "Marcus has been plowing our street for free for 6 of those years. Before him, we had to wait for the city, which sometimes took days. He's never asked for money, never complained, never refused to help. And Barbara, you stole his equipment. You can dress it up however you want, but that's what happened. You went to his house in the middle of the night and took his property." "I've already explained my reasoning," Barbara said coolly. Next comment. A woman named Patricia stood up, one of Barbara's supporters. "I think we're losing sight of the bigger picture here. The HOA exists to manage the community, and that includes essential services like snow removal. Marcus is just one person. What happens when he's not available? What happens when he decides he's done? We need a professional, accountable solution." "Then hire a professional," someone shouted from the back. "Don't steal from residents." The meeting devolved from there, with people arguing over each other and Barbara struggling to maintain order. I sat quietly, letting others defend me, until Barbara brought up the violation list. "Regardless of the snow removal debate," she said, projecting a document onto the screen at the front of the room, "we have outstanding violations that need to be addressed. Mr. Yates has been notified multiple times about his commercial vehicle, oversized trailer, and improper garbage storage. These are not personal attacks. They're enforcement of the rules every resident agreed to when they purchased their home." I stood up. "Barbara, you and I both know those violations are retaliation. I've had that trailer for 4 years. You've driven past it 1,000 times. It only became a problem after I reported you for theft. The timing is irrelevant. Rules are rules. Then enforce them equally. Tom Hendricks has a boat trailer that's bigger than mine. Sarah Connors parks her landscaping truck on the street every day. Half the neighborhood had their garbage cans out for 3 days last month when collection was delayed. But I'm the only one getting violation notices." Barbara's face tightened. "If you're aware of other violations, you're welcome to report them through the proper channels." "I don't want to report anyone because I'm not a petty tyrant with a grudge." The room erupted in applause and shouting. Barbara banged her gavel, demanding order, but the meeting was falling apart. People were standing up, arguing with each other, and several residents walked out in frustration. Finally, one of the other board members, a retired accountant named George Sullivan, held up his hands. "Everyone, please. This isn't productive. I'd like to make a motion that we table the discussion of Mr. Yates's violations until after the criminal case against Barbara is resolved. It's a conflict of interest for her to be pursuing enforcement actions against someone she's involved in litigation with." "I second that," said another board member, Linda Chen. Barbara's face went red. "You can't just all in favor," George said. 4 hands went up. Barbara was outvoted. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, gathering her papers. "I'm trying to do what's best for this community and I'm being undermined at every turn." "Then maybe you should resign," someone called out. Barbara stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I will not be bullied into abandoning my responsibilities. This meeting is adjourned." She stormed out of the community center, leaving the remaining board members to deal with the chaos. George took over, apologizing for the disruption and promising that the board would address the leadership situation at their next meeting. As people filed out, several residents stopped to shake my hand or express support. But I also caught hostile looks from Barbara's faction, and one woman, Helen Morrison, actually hissed at me that I'd destroyed the neighborhood's unity. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," Jennifer said as we walked to our car. She was right. Over the Christmas holiday, I received 2 more violation notices. These ones claiming my outdoor Christmas lights violated the HOA's tasteful decoration guidelines, and that my snowblower, which I kept on my side yard, was improperly stored equipment. The fines were now up to $500 total, and the letters threatened legal action if I didn't comply. I consulted with a lawyer, a friend of my brother named Scott Atwood, who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing my case, he was blunt about the situation. "You have a clear case for harassment," he said. "The timing of these violations, the selective enforcement, the fact that she's targeting you after you reported her for theft, it all adds up. But HOAs can be brutal, Marcus. They have legal authority to fine residents and even put liens on properties. If Barbara's determined to make your life hell, she can do a lot of damage before the courts stop her. What are my options? You can fight every violation individually, which will be time-consuming and expensive. You can sue the HOA for harassment, which will be even more expensive and will make you even more enemies. Or you can try to resolve this politically by getting Barbara removed from the board. The board already knows she's out of control. They voted against her at the last meeting. Then keep the pressure on. Document everything she does. Get your neighbors involved. Make it untenable for her to stay in power." I took his advice and started keeping detailed records of every interaction with the HOA, every violation notice, every social media post. I also started attending every board meeting, not to cause trouble but to be a visible presence and reminder of the situation. The criminal case moved forward slowly. Barbara's lawyer negotiated with the district attorney's office, trying to get the charges reduced or dismissed. The DA wasn't particularly interested in pursuing a harsh penalty for what was essentially a property dispute between neighbors, but they also didn't want to set a precedent that HOA board members could steal from residents without consequences. In February, Barbara accepted a plea deal. She'd plead guilty to petit larceny, a misdemeanor, pay restitution for the inconvenience and my legal fees, and complete 50 hours of community service. She'd avoid jail time, and the charge could potentially be sealed after a year if she stayed out of trouble. I wasn't thrilled with the light sentence, but I was mostly just glad it was over, or so I thought. The day after Barbara's plea hearing, I received notice that the HOA was filing a lawsuit against me for unpaid fines, now totaling $875. They were also demanding I remove my trailer from my property within 30 days or face additional daily fines of $50. Scott reviewed the lawsuit and shook his head. "She's not going to let this go. Even with the criminal case resolved, she's going to use the HOA to punish you." Can she do that after pleading guilty to stealing from me? Unfortunately, yes. The HOA is a separate legal entity from her personal criminal case. As long as she's on the board and has the votes, she can pursue enforcement actions. This is insane. Welcome to HOA law. I've seen pettier disputes drag on for years, but Barbara had overplayed her hand. The lawsuit against me galvanized the neighborhood opposition against her. The petition for her removal gained another 40 signatures, representing a clear majority of the residents. At the March board meeting, George Sullivan formally moved to remove Barbara from her position as president, citing her criminal conviction, her conflict of interest with me, and the divisive environment she'd created. The vote was 4-1, with Barbara being the only dissenting vote. She was removed as president, though she technically remained on the board as a regular member. George took over as interim president and immediately dropped the lawsuit against me, voiding all the retaliatory fines. "The HOA owes you an apology," he said at the meeting. "What happened here was wrong, and we're going to do better." Barbara sat stone-faced through the entire proceeding, then left without speaking to anyone. I thought that was finally the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my truck's tires slashed. Not just deflated, but cut with something sharp, ribbons of rubber hanging from the sidewalls. My trailer's tires were also destroyed, and someone had spray-painted Tyrant across the side in red paint. I called the police, and this time a detective came out, a woman named Detective Sarah Reeves, who'd apparently heard about the situation from Officer Patterson. She photographed the damage and asked if I had any idea who might be responsible. I have suspicions, I said, but no proof. Let me guess. Barbara Carmichael. She's the obvious candidate, Detective Reeves sighed. I'll talk to her, but without witnesses or cameras, it's going to be hard to prove anything. You might want to consider installing a security system. I took her advice and had cameras installed that same week, covering my driveway, truck, and yard. The installation cost me $1,200, but I wasn't going to keep living like this. The next incident came a month later. Someone filed an anonymous complaint with the town building department, claiming I was running an unlicensed business from my residential property. An inspector showed up unannounced and demanded to search my garage and workshop. I refused without a warrant, but the inspector said they'd received specific allegations about commercial activity that needed to be investigated. It took 3 weeks and another $500 in legal fees to Scott before the complaint was dismissed as unfounded. I ran a legitimate contracting business with a registered office address in downtown Buffalo. Occasionally, I'd stop at home to grab tools or take a lunch break, but I wasn't operating a business from my residence in any legal sense. I knew Barbara was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. The harassment continued through the spring. Anonymous complaints to the town about noise violations, even though I rarely used power tools at home. A report to animal control claiming my golden retriever, Bailey, was aggressive and had bitten someone, which was laughable given that Bailey was afraid of squirrels. Each complaint was baseless, but each one required time and energy to address. Jennifer was getting stressed. This is affecting our lives, Marcus. I'm worried about what she's going to do next. I know. I'm sorry you're caught up in this. It's not your fault, but we need to figure out how to end it. I'd been thinking the same thing. Scott's advice about making it politically untenable for Barbara had worked to remove her as president, but she was still on the board and clearly still held a grudge. As long as she lived in the neighborhood, I didn't think she'd stop. Then, in late May, something unexpected happened. Donald Carmichael, Barbara's husband, showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon. He looked tired and uncomfortable, standing on my porch with his hands in his pockets. "Marcus, can we talk?" I considered slamming the door in his face, but curiosity won out. "What do you want, Donald?" "I want to apologize. For Barbara, for everything that's happened." I crossed my arms. "You're apologizing on her behalf. She won't do it herself, so I'm doing it for both of us. What she did was wrong. The theft, the retaliation, all of it. I've told her to stop, but she's not listening to me anymore." "Then why are you here?" Donald took a deep breath. "We're getting divorced. I filed papers last week, and we're selling the house. We should be out of the neighborhood by the end of summer." I wasn't sure what to say. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. This has been coming for a long time. The HOA thing just brought everything to a head. Barbara's always been controlling, but this past year has been something else. She's become obsessed with you, with punishing you. I can't live with someone like that anymore." "Did she slash my tires, file those false complaints?" Donald looked away. "I can't testify against her or anything, but yeah, she did those things. I caught her researching you online, looking for ways to cause trouble. I told her she was going to end up in jail again, but she didn't care." She said you needed to learn that you can't disrespect the HOA. The HOA that she's no longer president of. In her mind, she's still in charge. She talks about the board like they are traitors. It's not healthy. He met my eyes. I wanted you to know that it's going to stop. Once we're gone, you'll be free of this. After Donald left, I told Jennifer about the conversation. She was relieved but skeptical. I'll believe it when they're actually gone, she said. The Carmichaels listed their house in June, and by July they had a buyer. I watched from my window as the moving trucks came. As Barbara supervised the loading with the same tight-lipped intensity she brought to everything. As Donald drove away in one car and Barbara in another, separately. The house sold in August to a young couple with 2 kids, the Hendersons, who seemed nice and had zero interest in HOA drama. On their first day in the neighborhood, I walked over with a welcome basket Jennifer had put together. I'm Marcus. I live 3 doors down. Welcome to Pinewood Drive. The husband, Kyle Henderson, shook my hand warmly. Thanks, man. We're excited to be here. We heard you're the guy who plows the street in winter. That's me. No charge, just trying to keep everyone safe. That's awesome. We really appreciate it. His wife, Amy, joined us with their kids. We also heard there was some drama with the previous owner. The realtor was pretty vague about it. I gave them the abbreviated version, leaving out most of the details. Let's just say she and I didn't see eye to eye on HOA matters, but it's resolved now. Good to know. We're not really HOA people anyway. We just want to raise our kids and have good neighbors. You'll fit in great then. That first winter without Barbara was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I plowed the streets after every storm without incident. No violation notices. No mysterious vandalism. No anonymous complaints. The new HOA president, George, sent me a thank you card and a $50 gift card to a local restaurant, which was a nice gesture even though I hadn't been doing it for recognition. The neighborhood Facebook page returned to normal posts about lost cats and recommendations for plumbers. The drama faded into local legend, the story of the HOA president who stole a snowplow blade and got arrested. I ran into Donald one more time the following spring at a grocery store in Amherst. We made awkward eye contact across the produce section and he approached me hesitantly. Marcus. How are you? I'm good. You? Getting there. The divorce is almost finalized. He paused. I wanted to say again that I'm sorry for everything. I know my apology doesn't fix what happened, but I mean it. I appreciate that. Is Barbara doing okay? She's living in North Buffalo now. Still angry at the world, but that's not my problem anymore. He grabbed a bag of apples. For what it's worth, she did pay a price for what she did. She lost her position, her friends, her marriage, her house. I know that doesn't give you your time back, but she didn't get away with it. After he walked away, I thought about what he'd said. Barbara had paid a price, but I'd paid one too. The stress, the legal fees, the constant vigilance, the damage to my truck. The sense of safety I'd felt in my own neighborhood gone, but I'd also learned something important. When someone with a little bit of authority decides to abuse it, the only solution is to stand up to them, even when it's hard, even when it costs you. Because giving in doesn't make bullies go away. It just encourages them. That night, Jennifer and I sat on our back deck, watching Bailey chase fireflies in the yard. The summer air was warm, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the sound of kids playing a few houses down. You ever regret pressing charges? Jennifer asked. Like, if you just let her take the blade, would all of that drama have been avoided? Maybe. But then what? She gets away with stealing and learns that she can get away with anything as long as she's HOA president. And I learned that I should just roll over whenever someone with authority decides to screw me. No, I don't regret it. Even with everything it cost us, even with that. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is messy and expensive and exhausting. Jennifer squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, for standing up to her, for not backing down. The story could end there, with the neat resolution of Barbara gone and life returning to normal. But there's an epilogue that happened 2 years later that's worth telling. I got a Facebook message from someone I didn't know. A woman named Susan Wright who lived in a neighborhood in Rochester, about an hour east of Buffalo. She said she'd heard about what happened with my HOA president and wanted to ask my advice. Her HOA president, a man named Gerald, was doing similar things, selectively enforcing rules, filing frivolous violations, making life miserable for residents who didn't bow to his authority. I talked to Susan on the phone and told her my story in detail. She was dealing with many of the same issues: the retaliation, the petty enforcement, the feeling of being powerless against someone who'd weaponized neighborhood bylaws. "What did you do that worked?" she asked. "How did you get her removed?" Documentation, community support, and consequences. She wasn't removed until she faced real legal consequences for her actions. The criminal charge changed everything because it proved she'd crossed a line. Until then, it was just her word against mine about whether the violations were legitimate. Our president hasn't stolen anything. He's just making everyone miserable with rules. Then you need to organize the neighborhood. Get the votes to remove him. Most HOA bylaws have provisions for removing board members with enough resident support. It's not easy and it won't be fun, but it's possible. I ended up talking to Susan several more times over the following months, coaching her through the process of building a coalition, documenting violations and selective enforcement, and ultimately forcing a special election that removed Gerald from the board. She thanked me profusely when it was over. "You helped us get our neighborhood back," she said. "I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to repay me. Just help the next person who's dealing with this. That's how we change things, one neighborhood at a time." Over the next year, I heard from 3 more people in similar situations. Word had somehow spread that I'd successfully fought back against an abusive HOA president, and people wanted advice. I helped where I could, sharing what I'd learned, connecting them with Scott when they needed legal guidance. It became clear that my situation wasn't unique. All over the country, there were neighborhoods dealing with power-hungry board members who'd forgotten that an HOA exists to serve the residents, not to control them. The system was designed with good intentions, but was vulnerable to abuse by people who craved authority. I started writing about my experience on a blog, detailing what happened and offering advice for others in similar situations. The blog got traction, shared on HOA reform forums and social media. I heard from hundreds of people with their own horror stories. HOAs that fined residents for the color of their front door, that banned political signs, that demanded access to people's homes for inspections, that foreclosed on properties over minor violations. The more I learned, the more I realized that what happened with Barbara was part of a much larger problem with how HOAs operate in America. They wield enormous power with minimal oversight, and while many are run by well-intentioned volunteers, the system attracts and empowers people who have no business being in charge of anything. I'm not an activist by nature. I'm a contractor who wanted to plow my street and be left alone. But sometimes circumstances push you into roles you never expected. Now, I spend a few hours each week helping people navigate HOA disputes, sharing what I learned, trying to make the system a little less terrible. Barbara, as far as I know, is still living in North Buffalo. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she tried to get elected to her new HOA board and was rejected by the residents who'd looked into her history. I don't take pleasure in that, but I don't feel sorry for her either. Actions have consequences, and she's living with hers. As for me, I still plow Pinewood Drive after every snowstorm. My truck is older now, and I've had to replace the blade once after it finally wore out, but I keep doing it because it matters. Because neighborhoods work better when people help each other without expecting anything in return. Because someone has to do it, and I have the equipment. Last winter, during the first big storm of the season, I was out plowing at 5 a.m. when I saw lights behind me. I pulled over, expecting someone who needed to get to work, but instead it was Kyle Henderson in his new Ford F-250, which he'd bought specifically so he could help with snow removal. He pulled up next to me, rolled down his window, and grinned. "Thought you could use some backup," he said. We spent the next 3 hours clearing the neighborhood together, working in tandem to handle the heavy snow. When we finished, exhausted and cold, we went back to my house where Jennifer had hot coffee waiting. "You know," Kyle said, wrapping his hands around the mug, "when we bought the house, we heard this crazy story about the previous owner stealing your plow blade. I thought it had to be exaggerated. But now that I've lived here a while and seen how dedicated you are to helping everyone, I get it. She must have really hated that you were doing good things without her permission." "That's probably the best way to describe it," I said. "Some people can't stand it when good things happen outside of their control. Well, you've got help now. And if any HOA president ever tries to mess with you again, you've got the whole neighborhood behind you." He was right. The neighborhood had changed since Barbara left. People were more engaged, more willing to stand up for each other, more aware that HOA boards serve residents, not rule over them. George was still president, running things with a light touch and common sense. The Facebook page was boring in the best possible way. I realized, sitting there with Kyle and Jennifer, that what I'd lost when Barbara stole my plow blade wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was my sense that neighbors would treat each other decently, that living in a community meant something. But I'd gotten that back, in a different form. Not through naivety or blind trust, but through standing up for what was right, fighting when necessary, and showing that bullies don't get to win just because they have a title. My snowplow blade is locked to my truck now with a heavy-duty chain when I'm not using it. I have cameras covering my property. I document every HOA interaction, just in case. These precautions are sad necessities, reminders that what happened can happen again. But I also have something Barbara never had. Genuine respect from my neighbors, earned through years of showing up, helping out, and refusing to use what little power I have to make others miserable. She had a title and authority and bylaws to back her up, but none of that mattered in the end because authority without legitimacy is just tyranny in a smaller package. On warm summer evenings, I still sit on my back deck with Jennifer, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Bailey is older now, content to lie at our feet rather than chase fireflies. The Hendersons' kids ride their bikes up and down Pinewood Drive. Neighbors wave as they walk past. It's normal and boring and exactly what I wanted when I moved here years ago. It took a fight to get it back, a fight I never asked for but don't regret. Because some things are worth protecting. Your property, your dignity, your right to help others without someone else's permission. The blog I started has a small but dedicated following now. Every week I get messages from people dealing with their own HOA nightmares, and I do what I can to help. Most situations don't end as dramatically as mine. Most HOA disputes are resolved through patient negotiation, documentation, and community organizing. But sometimes, when you're dealing with someone who's truly abusing their authority, you have to be willing to draw a hard line and accept the consequences. Jennifer sometimes asks if I do it differently, knowing what I know now. Would I still press charges if I could go back to that moment at the storage unit, seeing Barbara with my stolen plow blade? The answer is yes, without hesitation. Not because I enjoy conflict or wanted revenge, but because sometimes the only way to stop someone from hurting others is to show them that their actions have consequences. Barbara stole my plow blade thinking her position protected her, thinking I'd be too intimidated or too conflict-averse to fight back. She was wrong, and that wrongness cost her almost everything. But it also taught everyone watching, including me, that standing up to abuse is possible, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when it would be easier to just let it go. I'm still just a contractor who plows his street in winter. I didn't set out to become someone who fights HOAs or helps others navigate these disputes. But life has a way of pushing you into the roles you need to fill, whether you feel ready or not, and I'm ready now. Ready to help others, ready to stand my ground, ready to show that neighborhoods work best when we remember we're all just people trying to live our lives, not subjects waiting to be ruled. The snow will come again next winter, as it always does in Buffalo. I'll be out there at 4 in the morning with my plow blade securely attached, clearing Pinewood Drive while most people sleep. And if anyone ever tries to steal my equipment again, they'll find out what Barbara learned the hard way. Some people help their neighbors because it's the right thing to do. And some people can't stand that, can't handle good things happening outside their control. But in the end, the people who help win out over the people who hinder, because communities are built on cooperation, not control. Barbara Carmichael stole my snowplow blade and thought she'd taught me a lesson about respecting authority. Instead, she taught me and everyone watching that authority without accountability is just power without purpose, and that the best defense against petty tyrants is simply refusing to be intimidated. I keep a photo on my phone from that morning when I recovered my blade, standing next to Officer Patterson, and the equipment Barbara claimed the HOA had purchased. I look at it sometimes when I'm helping someone else fight their own HOA battle, a reminder that justice isn't always swift or satisfying, but it's possible if you're willing to work for it. The story of the HOA president who stole a snowplow blade has become neighborhood legend, the kind of story people tell newcomers as both warning and reassurance. Warning: HOAs can go wrong. Reassurance: communities can fight back. Every winter when I attach my blade and head out to clear the streets, I think about that morning I found it missing. The anger, the disbelief, the sense of violation. And then I think about everything that came after, the fight, the resolution, the lessons learned. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm glad I went through it once. Because now I know what I'm capable of when pushed, and more importantly, I know what's possible when a community stands together against someone abusing their power. That's worth more than any plow blade, more than avoiding conflict, more than keeping the peace at any cost. It's worth the fight, every difficult moment of it, because in the end we didn't just win, we proved that winning was possible. And that matters more than anything else.